Welcome back to the second lecture of our first week of the course, Citizenship and U.S. Immigration. Today we're going to talk about citizenship at birth. This is a relatively short lecture to place in context the United States practice of birthright citizenship. You may recall in our first lecture, we said that there were three ways that U.S. citizenship might be acquired. Today we're beginning two sessions on birthright citizenship, birth in the United States, as one mode for attaining United States citizenship. Another is birth abroad if at least one parent is a United States citizen, a topic that we will come back to, and of course naturalization, which we covered in our previous lecture. There's some additional terminology for you. I'm going to introduce two Latin terms, the first of which is jus soli. Jus soli is a Latin term meaning right of the soil. It's a right by which nationality or citizenship can be recognized to any individual born in the territory of the related state, or as stated here on the slide, the geographical location of one's birth determines one's citizenship. The citizenship status of the parents is irrelevant. Under the jus soli, the citizenship status of the parents is irrelevant. Now, by contrast, there's another Latin term called the jus sanguinis, and that's Latin meaning right of the blood or law of the blood. The citizenship of one's parents determines one's own citizenship. So the physical location of birth is irrelevant. These are somewhat antagonistic principles. They compete with each other if they are followed exclusively, as we will discuss. So, given those two definitions, you can see that with respect to what I've highlighted here in terms of one method to attain citizenship in the United States, birth abroad if at least one parent is a United States citizen. This means that the United States follows both the jus soli, birth in the United States, and the jus sanguinis, birth abroad if at least one parent is a United States citizen. So it's this second category that most closely mimics the law of the blood, the jus sanguinis. You are a citizen because your parent was a citizen, and that applies only for births abroad. This map of the world demonstrates countries that recognize jus soli and countries that recognize jus sanguinis. And it said, as stated here, countries that recognize automatic birthright citizenship. Yes, those are the countries with the black designation. And what has always fascinated me about this is the fact that it's the Western Hemisphere, or the New World, that follows the practice, a very generous practice, of awarding citizenship simply based upon physical birth. There is no need to trace the citizenship of one's parents or one's grandparents. A birth certificate is all that is required in any of these countries. So that includes South America, with one exception, Central America, with several exceptions, relatively small countries. It includes Mexico, the United States, and Canada. You often hear the claim that the United States practice of birthright citizenship, which is admittedly generous in that it would award citizenship to persons even temporarily here and persons who are here in an undocumented status, whose parents were here in an undocumented status. But the United States is not alone in following those rules of the jus soli. Countries in white, and you can see that that's most of Europe and Africa and Asia. No, they do not follow the automatic birthright citizenship. What they follow instead is the jus sanguinis. So in those countries, in most instances, the way to establish that one is a citizen of that country is by proving that one of one's parents was a citizen of that country. Or in some cases, a grandparent was a citizen of that country. This is more complicated administratively for reasons that may seem obvious. A birth certificate is relatively easy to attain, prove, disprove, compared to the necessity for a person to be able to prove the citizenship of a parent. So think about your own instance. If you were born in the United States, if that's your citizenship, how would you go about proving the citizenship of your parents? Well, at least in a jus soli country, you could simply produce their birth certificate, and that's how you would prove it. In another country, it's more difficult than that. You would need some kind of passport, identity document, national identity document, or other administrative feature. Now, there are a few countries in gray where it says cannot confirm. We're not entirely sure what they do with respect to awarding citizenship, whether it is at birth or by parentage or some combination of both. Here's another map representing the same thing, just with different colors, but again, it highlights the uniformity, really, of the Western Hemisphere versus the rest of the world, as well as the New World in using and recognizing the rules of jus soli. Now, there is a trend in some countries toward restricting the jus soli by requiring that at least one of the child's parents be a national of the state in question at the child's birth, or a legal permanent resident of that state, of the territory and state, at the time of the child's birth. One example is Great Britain. In recent years, it has moved away from a pure jus soli, recognizing territorial birthright citizenship, to a modified form that requires that the parent be in the country legally and have some sort of permanent legal residence there. Now, also under jus soli and jus sanguinis in these various parts of the world, dual nationality becomes possible, and in fact it is increasingly common. As persons are born in a jus soli regime, the United States, Canada, Mexico, South America, Brazil, someone born there who can also claim citizenship by descent from their parents. So it's quite easy to create dual nationality so long as those countries both recognize the citizenship of the children. That's the nature of having antagonistic principles, if you will, having a jus sanguinis, a jus soli. If the world all followed the same rule, then we would very rarely have dual nationality. On the flip side, it is also possible to be stateless. You could be born without a nationality. That can happen in a jus sanguinis country if your country of origin does not recognize birth abroad as acquiring citizenship from that particular parent. I've written an article on statelessness that also considers the possibility of statelessness in the United States, including some present reports of statelessness in the United States. It's part of the optional materials, so if you are interested, I encourage you to take a look at that in the reference materials that follow this lecture. One last slide is looking at how the European Union has changed over time in terms of jus soli regulations. You'll see here, as I was mentioning earlier, the United Kingdom has joined Belgium, Finland, France, Italy, the Netherlands. They award citizenship for the second generation upon reaching the age of majority. In other words, if you have undocumented non-citizens or undocumented persons who give birth on French soil in the United Kingdom, their immediate children do not become citizens, but their children's children may become citizens. So it's a compromise between a pure jus soli rule and a pure jus sanguinis. The idea is to recognize a sense of justice or a sense of belonging for persons who are long-term residents of those countries but are not yet citizens. And also you see jus soli for the second generation upon birth. Belgium, Germany, Ireland, Portugal, and again the United Kingdom, there are some complicated rules. And then jus soli for the third generation, but countries that have no jus soli at all: Austria, Denmark, Greece, and Luxembourg. There is some convergence between jus sanguinis and jus soli countries. As we mentioned earlier, the United States follows both. It is predominantly jus soli in that birth within any one of the 50 states will provide citizenship. But it's also jus sanguinis in the sense that by statute we have extended citizenship to the children of parents born abroad. John McCain, for example, born in Panama, and other examples. That's an example of the jus sanguinis. It is by statute. In conclusion, then, one question that probably occurs to you is, how did the United States become a jus soli nation? One that practices territorial birthright citizenship. This is an interesting history that remains relevant today, and it is a history that we will turn to in our next lecture.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.